This morning, we're learning more about the Trump administration's latest attempt to deter immigrants from crossing the border. Bloomberg reporting that for months, the White House has been trying to find a way to block undocumented immigrant children from enrolling in public schools. This as California becomes the latest state to challenge the administration's public charge rule, which aims to make it harder for poor immigrants to become legal residents. The mastermind behind both of those policies, Trump aide Stephen Miller, whose path to power made it to 2 front pages this weekend. The Times writing this: Mr. Miller now occupies a large West Wing office and has influence on virtually every element of immigration policy, from the words the president uses to the regulations. Mr. Miller is a speechwriter, policy architect, personnel director, legislative aide, spokesman, and strategist. At every step, he has pushed for the hardest line possible. Joining me now, the reporter behind that piece, New York Times, Jason Deparle. He's also the author of the new book out tomorrow. A good provider is one who leaves one's family and migration in the 21st century. And Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney and professor at the University of Alabama Law School, and Congresswoman Sherrill back with me. Joyce, I want to start first with the report that the Trump administration is trying to block immigrant children from attending public school. I know you dealt with something like this in Alabama. What happened?
So this is clearly unconstitutional, and it stems from a Supreme Court case back in the 1980s called Plyler versus Doe. In the Alabama case, Alabama's efforts by state law to force kids to reveal their parents' immigration status so that they could register for school, a measure, that was clearly an effort to force people who were here without legal immigration status to reveal themselves, was ultimately held unconstitutional by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court declined to reverse that ruling. And this is a really common sense reasoning when you think about it. It says, first, if these kids can't get an education, they'll never be able to make a contribution, that we shouldn't penalize them at that young age. And then secondarily, it says we aren't a country that punishes innocent children for decisions that their parents make. 2-, 3-, 4-year-old kids don't choose to come to this country illegally. Even older children are directed by their parents. They should still get an education. That's been very clear law in this country since at least the 1980s. So this effort to go around such a clear rule of law in such a mean-spirited way is, I think, a very dangerous development in this area.
Congresswoman, while it might be unconstitutional, does the spirit of it reflect how America currently feels? We know that our public education system is failing. Are there Americans who might not be hardline anti-immigrant, Americans who certainly don't support child separation policy, but who do support the idea that until every American child is getting a good education, we shouldn't offer an education to others? And yes, it may be unconstitutional, but I'm just talking about the spirit.
I think there might be some Americans, but that's certainly short-sighted. When we're not educating young people, we're not doing the most we can for our economy. Yes, do we need to do a better job educating American citizens? Certainly. I'm proud to say that New Jersey has one of the best public school education systems in the country right now. However, we also need to make sure that as we have young children here who were brought here through no fault of their own, that we're giving them a good economic future. Because, when we've just had DACA reform passed in the House. So when we see this, chances are many of these children are going to be contributors to our economy in the future. They can't do that if they don't have an education.
Great point. Jason, in your piece about Stephen Miller, you quote some of his early columns and TV appearances, and a couple stuck out to me. The quote from Theodore Roosevelt that was included in his high school yearbook: "There can be no 50-50 Americanism in this country. There is room here for only 100% Americanism. Only for those who are Americans and nothing else." And then in his first job as an aide to Republican Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann arguing that unauthorized immigrants were, quote, bringing in diseases, bringing in drugs, bringing in violence. We have heard very similar language from the White House, and it seems like Miller formed these opinions at a young age. Yet when he joined this administration, former aides to the president said he's just a speechwriter who's really smart and who gets the president's voice. He's not just a speechwriter anymore. He's had these values for quite some time, and now those values and views are being enacted in policy.
No, he's not just a speechwriter. He's the most prominent face of a very influential movement that has, I think, overtaken the Republican Party, the movement to restrict immigration. And I think there's an element of potential self-fulfilling prophecy in this. Critics of immigration worry that immigrants won't assimilate, but if you continue to tell them that they're not welcome, and if you deny their children access to public education, you're almost ensuring the outcome that you fear.
Joyce, the latest immigration move out of the White House is this public charge rule, making it harder for immigrants who require government assistance to get legal status. I know there are several lawsuits around that I want you to help us understand. But at the same time, the president saying he is sick and tired of immigrants coming to this country and immediately going on welfare, leaving out the fact that the majority of immigrants coming into this country aren't currently eligible for welfare. I'm talking dreamers, undocumented immigrants, temporary workers, seasonal workers, H-1B visa holders. None of these people get welfare. And when you're talking the days of the Statue of Liberty, we didn't have a welfare state.
You know, this change to the public charge rule is very much in keeping with the mean-spiritedness that really permeates all of the president's policy on immigration. And as you point out in this area, it's not really a problem. This is part of an ideological shift, and we have to remember that Miller doesn't come to immigration with enormous practical experience or policy work in the area. He is primarily an ideologue, and so this is an effort to continue this trend of restricting not just immigrants who come here without legal status, but also legal immigration. It's dangerous, and it's also surprisingly short-sighted. You know, you were asking about schools in Alabama, which is a head count state. That means its federal funding for education is based on the count of kids in the classroom. When immigrant kids and the children of migrants didn't go to school in Alabama because of its bill, funding dropped dramatically, and it was sort of a way of, you know, cutting off your nose to spite your own face. We see many bad economic fallouts when we don't appreciate the impetus that immigrants bring to our economic engines.
Jason, we know that Stephen Miller's anti-immigrant ideology is in line with the president's views, and a lot of them have made major headlines and caused huge backlash. I'm talking the Muslim ban, child separation policy. But you note in your piece that there are a number of policies, not just ideologies, but policies that haven't gotten the same attention, but maybe they should. Walk us through what they are. Yeah.
I think the president has instincts. I think Stephen Miller has policy knowledge and has an ability to operationalize, as one of his allies put it, the president's philosophy. Stephen Miller knows the 100 rules and regulations that can slow down the application for visas, that can make it harder for people who have a legal right to be in the country to get their papers through. And he's done that very successfully, quite out of the public eye.
So he's quietly slow playing these measures that are legal measures for people to gain accessibility.
Critics call it building an invisible wall.
Congresswoman, what do you do about that? What do you do if you are publicly fighting President getting funding for a wall between the United States and Mexico, and you're being successful at it? What do you do about the invisible wall?
Well, I think what we have to have in this country is comprehensive immigration reform. When we look at our immigration policies, there are many immigration policies that I think are immoral, like child separation. There's also the immigration policies that are just hurting our economy. And you can see those reverberating throughout agriculture, throughout our seasonal worker programs, even into some of our colleges and universities, which are the best in the world, now having trouble recruiting some of the top minds in the globe. These are really going to impact our ability to grow our economy in the future.
Remind our audience, illegal border crossings were at a 50-year low when President Obama left office. So in terms of comprehensive immigration reform, it sounds like both parties are interested. You just got to get it done.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.